Hello everyone, welcome to my channel.
My name is Olivia Hart, and 3 days ago, my father did something I didn't know a son could do to his own father. He flew my grandpa Theodore Hart, the man who built a shipping empire, from a rusted pier on a memory trip to Lisbon, and left him there. No wallet, no phone, no passport, just the Atlantic wind and a promise. Dad whispered at the gate, "You've had enough, old man." Dad thought he could come home, change the locks on Grandpa's Bellevue mansion, and start counting the money, my grandfather's money. But when Dad pushed open the front door, there was Grandpa, dry and smiling, his cane tapping once against the marble. "Oh, you're back," Grandpa said. "I have a surprise for you." The surprise? It would ruin my father's plan, expose the rot in our family, and force me to choose which blood to save. I thought I knew the answer. I didn't. Dad Richard Hart was all charming efficiency at SeaTac, the kind of man who could talk a gate agent into rearranging the weather. "One last trip before we do your study, Pop," he said, squeezing Grandpa's shoulder. "You'll love Lisbon, the azulejos, the sardines." He winked at me. "We'll bring back recipes." I didn't trust that wink. I hadn't trusted many of Dad's winks since Mom died. On our connection through JFK, Grandpa napped with his hat over his eyes while I texted Maya, my best friend and a junior associate at Lytton and Ames. "If Dad moves Grandpa's accounts while they're abroad, can a bank freeze be undone?" She responded with a waving off emoji. "And stop catastrophizing, Liv. No one steals from a billionaire with a paper trail." In Lisbon, the cobblestones glistened with rain, and Grandpa told stories about hauling rope at 14, about playing chess with dock workers who taught him patience with a bottle cap and chalk. Dad laughed in all the right places. He ordered wine. He volunteered to handle the passports at hotel check-in, so Pop doesn't lose them. On day 3, by the Belém Tower, Dad announced a detour. "Pop needs a nap. Let's split, Olivia. Grab us some pastéis. I'll take Pop to the hotel." I hesitated. Grandpa squeezed my hand. "Go on, kiddo. Bring 3. By the time I returned, the concierge's smile was tight. No Mr. Hart, no Grandpa. The room keys deactivated. The passports already checked out. My chest turned to ice. I redialed Dad again and again. Straight to voicemail. I sat on a stone step and counted breaths. 10 in, 10 out. Then I did the thing my family had always called meddling but which Grandpa privately called backbone. I moved. Police report. U.S. consulate. 30 hours of calls and fluorescent lights. In a small interview room, a consular officer named Patricia asked the question I'd been refusing to hear. "Has your father ever tried to take your grandfather's assets?" I opened my mouth to deny it, and found silence instead. When the emergency passport was ready for Grandpa Theodore Hart, Patricia slid a second envelope toward me. "He asked us to give you this when you came." A note in Grandpa's blocky script. "Olive branch, Olive. Follow the list. Keep your voice calm. Surprise him at home." I stared at the last line. "Call Maya. Tell her to open the folder named Blue Harbor." N. Blue Harbor? Maya repeated on speaker as I walked through Lisbon's morning crowds. "Your grandfather left me an encrypted folder 2 months ago with that name. I thought it was litigation prep. I didn't look." "Open it." My voice shook. "Now." Keystrokes. A soft exhale. "Liv. Wow." "What?" "A sting." She lowered her voice. "Your grandfather anticipated a deed of gift push. He recorded meetings with Greg Sloan, that notary Dad uses for hush-hush estate tune-ups. He documented Dad's gambling debt. There's a spreadsheet. Emails to 3 real estate agents requesting valuations on the Bellevue property. Dates are 6 weeks old." My blood drummed in my ears. "He knew." "He suspected," Maya said. "And he set a tripwire. If your dad moved him across international borders without his phone or wallet, I was to call Ozza Haynes at the Western District of Washington. There's a memo. Elder financial exploitation. Transportation with intent to defraud, interstate and international implications." "Why me? Why not press a button himself?" "Because he wanted you on record making the choice." "Choice." The word cut. At the consulate, Patricia smiled like a co-conspirator. Your grandfather's car is waiting. Driver knows the house. He's here? She tipped her head. He will be where he needs to be. On the flight home, I read Blue Harbor in full. Grandpa had kept a diary, brief, precise entries. Ours charm masks rot, loves shortcuts. Hates the slow dignity of work. He'd captured Dad on audio coaxing him to sign a medical update on a laptop at a Starbucks. The same Starbucks where, Blue Harbor noted, Sloan notarized the deed, for $300 cash, off-site, no IDs photographed. Halfway over the Atlantic, Grandpa texted from a number tagged Pearl. Land, swap cars, enter through garden. He'll try the front first. Leave the door on latch, recording on. I typed back. What's the surprise? The typing bubble blinked. Then, justice. That's also mercy. The hardest kind. I slept for 20 minutes and dreamed of locks clicking, of chess pieces sliding across marble, of my father's face when the king tipped. Seattle rain greeted me at the curb, fragrant and cold. At the mansion, the camellias along the brick walk were still blooming, pink saucers nodding like gossipers. Inside, Grandpa stood in his navy cardigan, alive in a way he hadn't seemed in years. His eyes, pale as sea glass, gleamed. Olive. He hugged me hard, then leaned on his cane. Did Patricia give you the note? And the instruction to keep calm? I tried to smile. That used to be your line when I'd come home blazing. He chuckled. Blazing is sometimes necessary. Today, we banked the fire. We had 20 minutes. Security film was already rolling. Maya's firm had sent a tech to route all doorbell, interior cams, and mics to a secure cloud. A locksmith named Frank, not Sloan, had swapped out the front and back locks at dawn. At 10:12 a.m., a silver BMW nosed into the drive. Dad climbed out in an immaculate charcoal coat. Aunt Claire, his sister, always lacquered, always humming with second-hand cruelty, slid out on the passenger side. My throat tightened. So it wasn't only theft, it was a family plan. Keys scraped the front lock. Once, twice. Harder. A curse. Footsteps to the back. The new deadbolt held. Silence. The doorbell. I nodded to Grandpa. He opened the door. Dad blinked at the sight. The grandfather he'd abandoned, dry and smiling. The granddaughter he thought too tender to choose. What, how? Oh, you're back, Grandpa said. I have a surprise for you. Dad tried on concern the way he tried on ties. We were sick, Pop. Food poisoning. We thought you'd... Enough, I said. Calm voice. Calm voice. If you use the word misunderstanding, I'm going to record over it with the truth. Aunt Claire lifted her chin. You don't speak to your father like that. Grandpa's cane tapped the marble. My house, Claire. My rules. I held up my phone so the tiny red recording dot caught the foyer light. Washington's a two-party consent state. I'm informing you both that this is recorded. Dad's mouth pinched. You can't lock a legal owner out of his property. About that, I said, and pointed to the console table where a neat stack of papers rested beneath a silver paperweight shaped like a tugboat. Motion to invalidate deed of gift on grounds of fraud and undue influence. Filed this morning. And here, I lifted another sheet, are copies of emails you sent to Sable Realty and Nordland Homes, asking for market analyses on this address before the alleged gift. Aunt Claire's lacquered composure cracked. Richard. Dad shot her a look that said shut up. Grandpa's voice softened, almost affectionate. Richard, when did you start hating the way I built things? Was it the first time I told you no? Dad's jaw didn't move, but his eyes flared. You never saw me. You saw labor. Markets. Ships. You saw a replacement for yourself. His voice rose. I brought you to Lisbon to remember who you were, and you punished me for it. Lisbon? I repeated. Where you took his passport and left. He shrugged a cheap spasm. He got home. Grandpa nodded. I did. And because I did, you get the mercy part. Dad actually laughed. Then 3 cars pulled in behind the BMW, 1 sedan, 1 SUV, 1 black Suburban that telegraphed prosecutors even in the rain. The foyer felt too large for its air. Assistant U.S. Attorney Haynes was younger than I'd expected, sharp-eyed, efficient. She flashed credentials, introduced the King County detective accompanying her, and then politely, almost gently asked Dad and Aunt Claire to remain in the foyer while she served paperwork. "Mr. Hart," Haynes said to Grandpa, "per your counsel's request and our preliminary review of the recordings in Blue Harbor, we're here to preserve evidence. No arrests today. We'll take statements. We'll collect the Sloan notary files." She glanced at Dad. "And we'll advise everyone present about exposure." "Exposure?" Aunt Claire repeated, as if the word were a foreign currency. "Elder financial exploitation, attempted fraud, international abandonment with intent to defraud." Haynes's tone never rose. At minimum, Dad shifted into his other suit, the litigator's. "You have no proof." Grandpa tapped the cane against marble. "Open the study," he told me. In we went. On the desk, a hard drive labeled Harbor Cut. Haynes Tech plugged it into a laptop. Video flickered up. Starbucks chatter, the swoosh of steamed milk, Dad's voice. "It's a medical update. Standard boilerplate. Just sign there, Pop." Then Sloan, counting out cash, muttering something about off-site convenience. Aunt Claire paled visible shades. Haynes didn't crow. She simply nodded, time-stamped, logged. "We'll need the Sable and Nordland emails too." "Printed," Maya said from the doorway, damp hair curling in the rain. She crossed and set a second stack on the desk. "Marked as exhibits A through F." Dad stared at me like I'd grown gills. "You brought in the feds?" "Grandpa did," I said. "I made a choice to follow through." He snorted. "Of course you did. You were always his little deputy." Something in my chest wanted to snap. Calm voice. Calm voice. "I'm your daughter, and you left your father to be disappeared. Don't confuse love of justice with treachery." Haynes closed the laptop. "We'll finish the evidentiary collection, then leave you to your civil process. Mr. Hart?" To Grandpa. "Your counsel asked me to deliver the other set of documents personally." Grandpa took an envelope, weighed it in his palm like a fisherman deciding if a catch was worth keeping. Then he slid it across the desk to Dad. Dad opened it. "Read." Blinked. "Read again." This is irrevocable charitable trust," Grandpa said softly. "The Bellevue mansion, the island cabin, the marina stake. I've transferred all real property to the Hart Foundation for Maritime Scholarships. I remain grantor with a life estate. When I die, Olivia becomes trustee." Aunt Claire swore, then bit it off. Dad's voice was a rasp. "You'd rather give it to strangers than your blood. They won't abandon me in a foreign country," Grandpa said. "And they'll remember their debt to the sea." Dad's hands crumpled the envelope's edge. "I'll contest." Grandpa's gaze was almost kind. "You can try, but contests require clean hands." Haynes thanked us, advised next steps, and filed out with her team. The house swallowed the silence they left behind. Dad looked at me as if I'd set the trap myself. "You think this makes you noble?" "No," I said. "It makes me responsible." His smile curdled. "Then, be responsible for the consequences." He left with Aunt Claire in a storm of perfume and contempt. Grandpa exhaled like a dock worker, letting go of a line. "Tea?" I started to cry. "Litigation is a kind of weather. Pressure rises. Skies darken, people make bad decisions in pouring rain." Margaret Chen, yes. The Margaret everyone whispers about in downtown lobbies took our civil case. "We're not asking for damages," she said. "We're asking for certainty." She filed for a temporary restraining order enjoining Dad from entering the property, liquidating heirlooms, or contacting house staff. Dad hired Robert Michaels, who liked Latin and theatrical pauses. He painted Grandpa as a mercurial patriarch, me as a granddaughter with outsized influence, and the trust as a selfish end, run around filial duty. On social media, Aunt Claire posted a carefully vague plea. "When elders are manipulated, families suffer." Comments bloomed like mildew. We turned the guest room into a war room. Timelines on poster board, email strings tabbed, receipts in plastic sleeves. The Blue Harbor Drive sat like a beating heart in the center. Every night, I wrote a page in a cheap notebook. What we had, what we feared, what I wished I could say to my father that didn't sound like a knife. Grandpa cooked. He moved slowly, stirring soups, baking biscuits too salty, telling me stories I thought I'd heard but now heard right. "I used to think that money made men decent," he said, setting a bowl in front of me. It doesn't. It makes them louder. Do you regret the trust? He considered. No. I regret not teaching your father the difference between inheritance and legacy. Is there a difference? An inheritance is something you get, he said. A legacy is something you become. I tucked that sentence away like a bandage. I had a feeling I'd need it. King County Superior Court, Department 12. Mahogany, flags, fluorescent hum. Dad wouldn't look at me. Aunt Claire wore a pale suit like frosted bone. Our row was a small Navy river. Grandpa, me, Maya, Margaret, our paralegal with a neat bob and 1,000 tabs open. Michael stood crisp and cutting. Opposing counsel will wave around Starbucks videos and trust documents prepared under duress. He gestured toward Grandpa without quite pointing. But we asked the court to see through the melodrama. A deed is a deed. Margaret, no theatrics, no Latin. A deed, procured by deceit, is not a deed. The evidence shows misrepresentation, improper notarization, premeditated valuation requests, and an international abandonment designed to create possession. This is not melodrama, it is pattern. We called Sloan first. He smelled like nervous cologne. Under oath, his story wobbled. Mr. Hart Richards said his father had mobility issues. Margaret's eyebrows rose. And did he? Well, he did walk in under his own power. How much did Mr. Hart pay you? $300. Standard? No. Standard is $25. Margaret didn't smile. Thank you. Michael's cross-examined into fog, but the Starbucks hiss and the cash counted spoke for themselves. Then my testimony. Hands on wood. Oath thick on my tongue. Margaret walked me through Lisbon, the concierge's tight smile, Patricia's tidy files. She asked what Blue Harbor felt like when I opened it. I didn't say, like betrayal wrapped in love. I said, like clarity. Michaels tried to pin me to my father. You dislike him. I love him, I said, and watched him flinch. That's why this hurts. And yet you invited federal involvement? I honored my grandfather's instruction. I made a report when I believed a crime occurred. Calm voice. Calm voice. Dad took the stand. Michaels softened his tone. Mr. Hart, why Lisbon? Dad baritoned. He loves the ocean. I wanted to give him memories. And the deed? His idea. He wanted to secure my future. Margaret approached like a tide coming in. Mr. Hart, which came first, the valuation emails to 3 realtors, or the alleged gift? He hesitated. I don't recall. Exhibit D shows your request to Sable Realty, dated March 3. The deed you claim as a gift is dated March 26. Correct? He stared at the page. Yes. And you told a notary your father had mobility issues. That was a misunderstanding. She slid a transcript across the rail. And in Lisbon, who possessed your father's passports? He pressed his lips thin. I did. When you left the hotel, where were those passports? On me. On you. Margaret repeated quietly, like an undertaker laying a lily. No further questions. I waited for anger to feel like victory. It did not. The judge, Honorable Patricia Morrison, leaned forward. I will rule on the deed. As to the trust, absent evidence of incapacity or undue influence, she looked at me briefly. This court sees a valid charitable instrument. Arguments about filial duty belong at dinner tables, not in equity. Michaels objected. His objection went nowhere. Judge Morrison's ruling on the deed was short and devastating. Deed void for fraud and undue influence. Possession remains with Theodore Hart. Defendant is restrained from the premises absent invitation. The gavel sounded like a dock cleat catching rope. Dad exhaled a ragged breath, through a smile that wasn't a smile. He did not look at me as he left. I thought the surprise had been the trust, the elegant checkmate that saved the board, but Grandpa had left one more gift piece face down. 2 nights after the ruling, he called me into the study and handed me a ship's log bound in cracked leather. Turn to the last page. In Grandpa's small, patient script, if Richard ever tries to take what isn't his, give him the thing he thinks he wants. Give him the company. I blinked. Grandpa what? He smiled, melancholy and bright. He wanted the house and the shine. He never wanted the work, so I gave him the work. The next morning, our family convened at Hart Maritime headquarters. Counsel, board members with windburned faces. Dad walked in late, bristling. "What fresh theater is this?" Grandpa set a folder in front of him. "The CEO seat," he said. "If you want a legacy, build one." "And pro," Dad laughed, then stopped when he saw the paperwork. Interim CEO of a company held together with dock lines, union contracts, insurance audits, Coast Guard inspections, fuel hedges, aging hulls, razor-thin margins, and a cash position that looked less like a treasure chest and more like a sailor's wallet after shore leave. "You made it look bad," he said. "It is hard," Grandpa said. "It always was. I hid the strain so you could learn love before labor. You learned contempt instead." Dad shoved the papers away. "I won't be tested like a child." "Then stop acting like one." Grandpa's voice gentled. "Here is the mercy, Richard. Take the job for 6 months with a union mentor and a compliance monitor. Earn a salary. Pay down your debt. Prove you can keep men safe in weather." Dad stared at the floor. "Is this what you call love?" "It's what I call hope." He didn't answer. He took the folder and left. For 6 months, the company taught him humility, one thin paycheck at a time. He missed meetings, learned not to miss them, barked at a captain, learned to listen, tried to cut maintenance, watched the compliance monitor shake her head until he stopped. He paid down 2 cards. He stopped gambling. He didn't text me. At Thanksgiving, he came to the mansion and stood on the porch like a kid, asking if he could come back inside after breaking a window. "I can't undo Lisbon," he said. "But I can try to be a man your grandfather would hire." I held the door open and did not step aside. "You burned the bridge," I said. "You can cross it anyway, on your knees." He nodded once and did. Not literally. But I saw the apology drop his shoulders. I saw the work click into place where a shortcut used to sit. Sometimes mercy is the hardest justice. Grandpa and I planted winter pansies along the walk, our breath clouding in the air. The trust papers were finalized. The restraining order became a quiet boundary. The company list started showing Dad's name with fewer red flags and more green check marks. On a gray Tuesday, Ozza Haynes called to tell us she'd offered Dad a pre-charge diversion conditioned on restitution to the house staff whose hours he'd tried to slash, a donation to the Maritime Scholarship Fund, and 6 months of verifiable company service. "We prefer redemption to trophies," she said. I liked her even more. That night, Grandpa poured tea and asked the question he'd asked my heart since I was little. "What did you become today, Olive?" I thought of Dad's bowed head, of Aunt Claire's dwindling posts, of the way the docks smell in winter like iron and salt and second chances. Someone who finally knows the difference between inheritance and legacy. And someone who can forgive without forgetting. He smiled, set his cup down, and tipped a rook over with one finger. Checkmate is only beautiful if the other player gets up and shakes your hand. We heard a car door, footsteps, the bell. Dad stood there with a navy cap in his hand and a tiredness that looked like honesty. "I heard about the scholarships," he said. "I'm here to write a check." "Write it to work," Grandpa said. Dad nodded. "That's all I've been writing lately." I stepped aside this time. We weren't healed. We were moving. The house held its breath and then, for the first time in months, exhaled.